No one ever forgets their first time. The crazy blend of emotions that range from joy to fear, the feeling that you're not doing anything right. But at the same time, there's an undeniable rush of adrenaline, the realization that this is finally happening. I, of course, am referring to the first time one of my player characters crossed over the Rainbow Bridge to feast forevermore in Valhalla, and it was glorious. Although I've said this before, it bears repeating. The GM is not an adversary to the players. Yes, we portray the monsters and every NPC that the players interact with, good or bad, and we are the arbiters of the game world's fate. But the dichotomy of being a GM is that we succeed through our players. If we were to set up events in a way that destroyed the players, every campaign would be rather short and no one would want to play the game. Besides, it usually is the poor decisions that players make that end up being a player's undoing, rather than something that the GM did, as I shall demonstrate in the coming minutes. Firstly, to establish where in the timeline this takes place, we're in my bright-eyed, bushy-tailed new Game Master period. This is still the first campaign for me and my players, and we are haplessly stumbling through the Dragon of Icespire Peak module. And on that note, it's also worth mentioning that there is a pretty strong spoiler warning for this tale, as we are going to go into detail for the Mountain's Toe Gold Mine quest. If you're still listening beyond this point, either A, you don't care, B, you're hoping for some secrets, or C, you just want the tea. And boy, is there tea. Just not in my cup. Secondly, it's time for you to meet our intrepid adventurers. The gruff dwarf rogue is our dear Willie's character Ulrich. He is joined by Ferocious Bunny's brash dwarf fighter Gimmert, and rounding out the group is Estelle, a powerful elf wizard portrayed by Harmony. The quest setup is quite simple actually. The new overseer of the Mountain's Toe gold mine, a one Don John Raskin, hires the party to escort him to the mine. Little do any of them know that the mine has been infested by a band of were-rats called the Whiskered Gang, who have trapped the dwarf miners in the tunnels. Now I have quite a few bones to pick with this adventure. We'll get to a bunch of them as we go along, but the first is that this is labeled as an adventure for 4th level. Having gone through it, I would say nay to that. I mean, we all know that the encounter math in 5e is a bit questionable, to give it more credit than it deserves, but there's a little bit more problems that we're going to touch on based off of that math. Right from the get-go, no one in the party liked Don John. They found his slower western drawl a bit off-putting, and the way he complimented them was deemed less than savory. You know, such things as, "You're a mighty formidable woman to be about these parts," and "Why, I never before been so impressed by some short gents as yourselves." Clearly, he absolutely deserved the whispered label of creep. And, as we know, my player's trustworthy radar has never, ever been wrong. Anyways, upon arriving at the mine and discovering the place is infested with were-rats, the party springs into action. They kill the 2 were-rats at the entrance of the mine, then immediately run down the tunnels, bashing in any door they come across. And this right around here is one of my other problems with the adventure. So much wasted space. There are 16 rooms in this place, and 8 of them are essentially filler spaces with nothing of importance or interest. So when you get players rushing around kicking down doors like it's Munchkin, there's a lot of wasted time for essentially nothing. A few filler rooms, that's fine, but exactly half? That's excessive. As an aside, as my players are rushing around crashing open doors and bursting into these empty rooms, they were not doing it stealthily. Which means I can only imagine that the other were-rats all gathered in this space all the way over there are all just like, so we should all be getting ready. Yeah, definitely. So by the time the party finally worked their way around to the one room where these were-rats are, they come face to face with a fully armed and prepared band of varmints. And this is not a small group. Thanks to the instructions of the module, we have 4 giant rats, 1 male were-rat for each party member, including Don John, and the female leader of the Whiskered Gang named Zeline Varnister. Remember how I said that this was not a 4th level adventure? Well, this is why it is not. If you use D&D's encounter math, it shows this is a ridiculously deadly battle. And even if we eliminated some of those enemies to make it a little bit more fair, it's still a severe encounter. Hence why you should have these creatures spread out through some of these empty rooms to balance things a bit more. And you can say, well, as the GM, it's your job to make it right. To which I would say, yes. But if you're a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed new GM, which is likely since this is a module designed in their Essentials kit as an introductory campaign, would you think that the module designers would ignore balance? But again, I digress. So into this severely unbalanced encounter stumble all the players. How will they get out of this mess? Alright, we kill you all now!
Hold up now. There's too many of us for you to take, and this is our lair now.
Well, see, there's a new sheriff in this town here. I'm overseer for this mine, and you varmints need to vamoose your cabooses out of here.
Oi! What did you do to all the other dwarf miners who were here?
They're in the back chamber. They refused to leave, so we are starving them out.
Look, see, clearly there is a lot of things happening here. Surely we can come to some sort of arrangement? Zeline explains that they had a lair elsewhere at a place called the Shrine of Savras, which has since been overrun by orcs and ogres. She and her group then came here and claimed the mine as their home. However, she says she would be willing to depart if their old home was available again. Okay, look, so I hate harping on the flaws of this adventure, but this is another problem with the adventure design. You see, the booklet explains that, quote, "The Werats say they'll go back to their old lair if the characters get rid of the orcs at the shrine, but this is only a ploy. The Werats have no intention of abandoning the mine." Which means, no matter what, a fight has to occur here. Look, I'm all for there being duplicitous villains in adventures. That's fine. But as someone who has done adventure design himself, this is poorly executed. There should be a way to influence the wererats to accept leaving the mine. But again, I digress. Look, we're not against this bargain, but can we verify that the dwarves are all right?
Very well, but leave him as a prisoner here to ensure you don't try anything.
Here now, see, I ain't staying in a rat-infested cave by myself. I'll stay with him, it's fine. Okay, look, so this normally should go without saying, but never split the party. There's a reason it's some of the most oft-repeated phrase when characters are investigating dungeons and going places. Bad things happen. So Gimmert and Don John Raskin stay behind to appease the Whiskered Gang, while Estelle and Ulrich go to check on the captive dwarves. Along the way, they pass another cave filled with another 5 giant rats. So let's update the encounter summary again. There you go. Before finally coming to a set of doors leading into a back chamber where 5 hungry and weak dwarves are hunkered in and waiting.
Who's there? We're friends. We're here to get you out of here alive.
No, we'll not surrender our mine to a bunch of filthy rats.
Okay then, so let's help you kill them. So here's the thing, these dwarves are weak. Like, some of the weakest NPCs that have ever existed weak. They have the stats of commoners. They literally do not change the encounter math here at all. It's also worth noting, in terms of bones picking, this module insists that the dwarves are unwilling to surrender and leave the mine. So again, we're back to that same fun nugget of the adventure design is flawed. And lest anyone forget, there is poor Gimmert and Don John hanging out in the middle of the rat pack with no knowledge of this going down. But to be fair, Gimmert is not exactly helping things either.
Oh yeah, you're all just tough rats, aren't you? Well, luckily I'm the biggest, baddest dwarf around and I'm not scared of ya.
Are you threatening us? You are, after all, outnumbered by us.
I just want to make sure you know what you're dealing with. You'd be in so much trouble if I picked a fight with you.
Let's get some more of our giant rats in here around this dangerous dwarf.
So we have Estelle and Ulrich preparing a revolution with captive dwarves in one room, and Gimmert is stoking the fires in the other. There's no way that this could possibly end badly, is there? Estelle and Ulrich burst out of the back chamber with a pack of dwarves at their back. Estelle slings beams of fire at the giant rats. Ulrich stabs them with his sword. These pathetic dwarf miners... They try to smack the rats with their hammers. Not very successfully. Again, they are commoners. The remaining rats chomp down on the dwarves and kill half of them practically instantly before they get eliminated. Now that's all well and good. But remember, these were-rats are on high alert, have been threatened by their hostage Gimmert, and the noise carries very easily throughout the caves. So while that part of the battle is going on, oh crap,
Kill them.
and with that, we're off. 4 giant rats swarm over Gimmert, chomping at the dwarf. The were-rats charge in and start knifing Donjon to death. Estelle and Ulrich hurtle down the corridor to challenge the rest of the Whiskered gang, and they arrive just in time to see Gimmert fall unconscious to the ground. Smelling blood, the giant rats lunge in to tear him apart. Now, when a creature falls unconscious to the ground in D&D, melee attacks against them have advantage. Plus, any attack that lands is a critical and results in 2 failed death saves. And you would think that this means it would be an easy matter to eliminate Gimmert. But the dice gods are a fickle bunch and they all just said nay, nay, nay. First rat, miss. Second rat, miss. It's beginning to look like some ridiculous comedy scene where Gimmert is lolling around unconscious on the ground and everything that should hit him is just whizzing right by. Then the first death save comes. And it's a failure. Tensions are rising as Estelle and Ulrich engage the were-rats, who prove to be much tougher than the giant rats they faced before. Imagine that. And then, it happens. A giant rat finally lands an attack, and its fangs sink into the soft flesh of Gimmert's neck. With a ravenous squeal of bestial delight, it rips out Gimmert's throat. And with the third and final death save fail, Gimmert is now dead. Somehow, the remaining player characters managed to defeat the rest of the Whiskered gang. I believe it took all of Estelle's spell slots, and nearly everyone was on the verge of death before they landed the final blow against Aline. A sad little funeral then took place outside the mine, with a dwarf playing Amazing Grace on the bagpipes, and then Gimmert, Donjon Raskin, and the dwarves who fell in the battle were all laid to rest in the earth outside the site of their horrific final stand. So in the end, Gimmert's death was not in vain. For the players, it brought attention to the dangers of splitting the party, and also the importance of having more options for healing on hand. For me as a GM, it was an eye-opening moment that made me recognize the importance of double-checking and triple-checking the encounter balance for published modules. It became such an important aspect of my prep afterwards because my faith in these pre-made modules was shaken considerably by this ridiculous failure at balance. And as for Gimmert, he was my first player character to be slain. For that, he holds a special place in my heart, and I will remember him well. Unless some other player shenanigans happen, which, according to my calculations, should be in T-minus, already happened. What were we talking about?